This episode is brought to you by Generate Solutions, your go-to AI experts specializing in empowering commercial real estate companies and environmental consulting firms. As AI is quickly transforming industries and enhancing efficiency, it is important you don't let your business fall behind. At Generate Solutions, we streamline workflows and automate tasks by creating custom AI agents tailored specifically to your business needs. Interested in taking your operations to the next level with AI? Email mfiorante@generatesolutions.com or find us directly on LinkedIn by clicking the link in the bio. On to our episode.
Good afternoon and welcome to another edition of A Conversation with John Conenna. Today it's going to bring me great pleasure because we go down that road of something that I studied and I loved and I wanted to do. And it brings me great pleasure to bring in a gentleman that I listened to for many years on the radio when I was driving from Norwich to my office and now driving from Oak Grove to my office. From about 5 a.m. to 1 p.m. in the afternoon. It's the, I'm going to use this word for you here, Bernie, because this is how I feel that you are, the legendary news reporter in the morning.
Thank you.
Bernie Tafoya from WBBM AM. Bernie, thank you for coming on, and what is going on with you, young man?
And don't forget the 105.9 FM.
Okay, yes.
We're big on that.
Yeah, that's the
and
FM
and the Odyssey app too.
And the Odyssey,
a lot of people listen on the app now too. As a matter of fact, when I'm listening at home, I don't even listen on the radio anymore. I listen on the on my Echo, and I just ask it to play WBBM News Radio, and it plays from the Odyssey app. Sure.
Yeah. And Bernie, what a clarity on that app! It's amazing. You know,
oh yeah, it's great
for sure. So, other than listening to you, those years of listening to you, what are you doing nowadays? I know you're kind of like in a semi-retired type mode.
Yeah,
correct?
I went from semi to now I'm calling it mostly retired. I work 1 day a week generally, so I work Fridays from 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. and report throughout the day and record stories that will run that day and then sometimes the next day.
Yeah, exactly. You grow up, do you start, you're been a Chicago guy your whole life, correct?
Sure, yeah.
Where does it start for you as that Chicago guy? What part of the town?
Well, believe it or not, I was born on the north side at St. Joseph's Hospital. It was the maternity hospital, which isn't the same St. Joe's that's there now. It was a separate maternity hospital. And my mom was from had lived in South Shore. She had lived in Inglewood. She was a South Sider. And so within 3 months, we were living back on the South Side, and I lived on the South Side my whole life. I lived in the city 55 years until moving to the suburbs, about 12 years ago.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I grew up in mainly, I started out in South Shore for 2 or 3 years, and then we moved to South Deering, which is on the far southeast side, where Wisconsin Steel used to be.
Oh, yes.
Around 106th and Torrance. I grew up in the Chicago Housing Authority projects in that neighborhood.
Wow. So the South Side is basically the roots, correct? I mean, start.
I love the South Side.
Because we're going to get into a question, because I'm a guy who started and left something, and now you're a guy that started there, but looks like you're a big-time Cub fan, but we'll get into that later, Brian. That's going to be my beef with you. No, but question for you.
Sox fans can beef all they like.
Yeah.
We have the record.
Bernie, we don't want to make this a 30-minute argument. Yeah. No, question for you. Do you have a passion, a love to do this? When does it start for you in the sense of, was it high school or something that you wanted to, get involved with this?
Actually, when I started in high school and was planning to go to college, I went to UIC, University of Illinois Chicago, which then was called University of Illinois Chicago Circle Campus.
Yes.
It was called UICC, now it's just UIC. And I had originally intended to go into pre-med. I was in pre-med to start.
Oh, wow.
And so then but I also, maybe I was just thinking beyond myself, but I thought, maybe I should have a plan in case medicine doesn't work out. Maybe I should have a plan, so I go to plan
Right.
B and then plan C. Yeah, let me turn something down too. And so I decided if I didn't become a doctor, I would want to become a journalist, and because this is when Watergate was going on.
Sure.
And so I was fascinated with Watergate and what was going on there, and so I thought that would be my second choice. And if I wound up going to my third choice, it would have been to be a high school civics or a history teacher. So I still haven't gotten there yet, but my parents were teachers.
Yeah, exactly. So you still got time, Bert. No.
I still have time. I'm only 67.
You take these classes at UIC for the journalism?
No, I took they don't even have a journalism program at UIC. Believe it or not, they have one at Champaign, down in Champaign.
Okay.
So what I did was for the first year I was in pre-med. And then after a year of pre-med, I decided, this may not be for me. Maybe I wasn't as into it as I thought, because everybody who was in pre-med with me was fanatical. And that was their lifelong desire, but they had a focus that I didn't have. And so I thought, okay, time for plan B. And so I joined the college radio station. They had a 10-watt radio station that broadcast to the west side and anywhere close. And so I joined that and started doing, DJing, news, the whole bit. You did a little bit of everything. And then I was majoring in communications and started taking all the English or any of the writing classes that I could, because they, like I said, they didn't have a journalism program, and they still don't have a journalism program, which in the third largest market in the country.
Exactly, you would think.
But so I took as many writing courses as I could, and then in my sophomore year, I wound up in a big class with about 200 people, and the professor had worked at a Chicago radio station, so he had some pull with some of the radio stations, and he announced that there was a job opening he knew for behind-the-scenes work at a Chicago radio station. And so anybody interested should see him afterwards. So I went down among about 30 or 40 other people
sure.
and got the information. And so wound up getting a job interview. It was basically to do traffic reports, gather traffic information, and to type up sports headlines and college football scores for WIND.
Got it.
Which at the time was a music station, and then eventually went into become a news talk station.
Bernie, I think that was 560, correct?
It is, still is 560.
And I remember a lady who lived in Norwich right by me named Connie Surzan.
Sure, I know Connie Surzan. I worked with her.
Yeah, sure.
And so, I interviewed for the job with a guy named Dick Stone, who was the news director at WIND. And about a week after the job interview, I hadn't heard back from him. Mm-hmm. And I thought, I don't know if I should bother him and call him and ask him if he'd made a decision yet. I don't know what the protocol is yet, because here I am, a sophomore, just getting into the business, and I didn't know what to do. So I thought, you know what, I'm just going to take a gamble, and I called him. And then when I called him and I identified myself, he went, "Oh yeah," as if now I remember you, but I don't think I was top of mind. He said, "Oh yeah." He goes, "I had a question about your typing skills. Could you come back in for a typing test?" And so I went back in. Apparently I did well, and I was one of the two people they hired. And
wow.
That started the career.
And Bernie, what year was that when, you remember roughly?
76.
76, okay. Wow.
76,
and
yeah.
How long does that last?
That lasted about two and a half years, because I did that, and then when they went to News Talk, I was a desk assistant, so I was helping supply the writers and the editors with their copy, just running newscasts back and forth into the studio, gathering information, things like that. So I eventually worked my way into doing that, and at the time, there was a traffic startup that was happening called Shadow Traffic. and was run, and the guy named Gary Lee was going to run it. Well, WIND was going to be their flagship station. That was be their biggest station they had, because WGN and WBBM already had their own traffic people doing it. So this WIND was going to do their own, have this traffic service. So Gary was working out of WIND doing the traffic for them for about 2-3 months.
Okay.
But he noticed me working there, and he noticed that, boy, he really knows the city. He knows what he's talking about. And so he approached me and said, "Listen, I've got I'm looking for people for my traffic service. Would you be interested in being our first program director?" And I was still in college.
Wow.
So
Talk about timing and being in the right place at the right time.
So, and it was basically, it would work for me because it was morning drive and afternoon drive, so I could go to school in between. So I did. I went. I was working full time at WIND and going to school as well, because besides doing the work in the newsroom, I also produced a talk show at night called Contact. It was with Dave Baum. It was with Clark Weber. There were a number of hosts at the time.
Names.
Jerry G. Bishop, Joel Sebastian, Bob Hale. I worked with all those guys. And so I did all that before going on to Shadow Traffic, spending a few months there, I'd say 7 or 8 months. And I got a call one day in July of '79 out of the blue. And there was a guy who identified himself as Ralph Howard. Now, he was a guy who worked at New York Radio News, but he was coming to Chicago to start being the program director for WCFL when they were starting their news talk operation. And he said, "I don't know." He goes, I don't know you, and you don't know me. He said, "But I've been hearing some great things about you through the grapevine, about the fact that you might be just what we need as an editor." It was one of our editors. He said, "Could we have lunch?" So I set up a lunch date with him. We had lunch. He said, "I'd like you to be my afternoon drive editor." Now, I'm still in college.
You're still in college.
I'm still in college. So I literally said to him, "I'd love to do that, but I'm still in college. Do you mind? Do you have any, like, a late night editor's job, like an evening editor's job? Because I still want to finish my degree." And he said, "Yeah, we can give you the 6 p.m. to 2 a.m. shift, and you could still finish your degree and be an editor for us." So that's what I did for WCFL. It was called Lifestyle Radio, the magazine for your ears.
Wow. And so after IND, the CFL thing kicks in.
Well, after Shadow Traffic.
Traffic, right.
It was the CFL thing. So I did I did the CFL thing as an editor, and then eventually I worked my way to doing reporting part-time with WCFL. So I was an editor a couple of days a week and a reporter a couple of days a week, all the while still finishing college. Wow. Now, I finished college in 1980, so I finished during that time I was there. And then the ratings were horrendous. I mean, nobody was going to compete with WIND at the time for news. They were the first in the market to go all news, so that was that. And so they blew everybody out. Well, all but about 5 people were fired on the same day. We were all called in one by one, and the general manager and the program director said, basically, "It's us, not you. We got to let you go because we're going into a different format." They were going back to music or something. And so I got back into the newsroom, and while all this was going on, and I got a phone call. A call came into the newsroom, and they said, "Bernie?" And I said, "Yeah." They go, "This is Lou Witz. I'm the general manager over at Shadow Traffic." I said, "Oh." He goes, "I hear there's a bloodbath going on there because word travels fast in radio." I said, "Yeah, how did you know?" He goes, "Are you one of the victims?" I said, "Yeah, I just got laid off." He said, "Well, how would you like your old job back?" Now, I just got fired. And within minutes, I didn't even pick up the phone to make a call, and I got offered. And I literally said to him, either through stupidity, arrogance, or confidence, I will come back, but I'm only going to stay until I find another news job. I said, once I find another news job, I'm going to leave. I just wanted to let you know so you don't feel like I, led you around.
Sure.
And he said, well, I'm glad you're honest with me. That's fine. So that's what I did. And I went back to Shadow Traffic for several months before moving on and going to WFYR.
Fire, which was a very, very, at that time, pretty popular station.
It was a very popular music station. Yes. And I did overnight anchoring and morning drive reporting. So I was doing morning drive reporting standing next to Lyle Dean. And Lyle has this deep voice of God sound. And here's me sounding like I didn't even have my voice change yet because I'm 22 years old or whatever. And, well, there you go, Lyle. Okay, thanks. It was pretty sad. But
it was a good mixture. It worked.
It worked. Lyle was great. And I got to, cover stories and get my feet wet there. And then I got laid off about a year later from WFYR. They were cutting back their news operation. And shortly thereafter, I wound up at WCLR, which is now The Mix.
Yes, The Mix, right.
I wound up at WCLR. Barry Keefe hired me as a reporter. And I was with them for about almost 5 years before they got rid of, started getting rid of their news people and just leaving Barry as the only news guy left. So Barry laid me off when it was time, and I'm glad I was the first one let go, first of the news people let go, because there were a couple others in public affairs who were let go after me.
Sure.
Because during the time I was laid off, which was very brief, I got a call at home from John Cody at WIND, from WBBM News Radio. And I'd seen him.
Now we're talking mid-'80s here now, at least, right? 84,
yeah,
85?
It's 86.
Yeah.
And John called me at home because we'd known each other from reporting on the street. So we'd had conversations before. So he knew from reading the Sun-Times and the Trib that I'd been laid off. And he called me at home. He said, hey, I hear you got laid off. I don't know if you're interested, but we have a behind-the-scenes job opening for a editor-writer at WBBM. And I'm thinking to myself, yeah, I'd be interested just to get my foot in the door there.
Sure.
Then see what happens from there. Sure enough, I wound up getting hired as an editor and a writer at WBBM. And I was the morning drive editor on weekends and an afternoon writer 3 days a week during the week for just, a year or so before.
And Bernie, I want to ask you because, and I think my memory serves me right, but you got to correct me if it doesn't. WBBM and WMAQ now are making the move with the news. They are battling each other.
Not yet. That happened in the 90s.
Okay.
And so what happened was our news director, Chris Whitting was the news director at the time, and he did what I thought was a fabulous job of bringing writers and anchors and reporters in about every 6 months to go over their writing, to make sure we had the best writing. He wanted to go over your scripts, make sure that, if there's any way to get better, you did. And I always think you can get better. I think I'm a pretty good writer, but I always think I can be better. And I mean, sometimes while I'm live, I'd be being introduced and I'm changing my script because I think I thought of a better way to say something. So, so Chris had me in for 6 months in, and was going over my writing. And afterwards he said, is there anything, you'd like to ask me? And I said, yeah. I said, I've been a reporter where I've been before. I said, in the last few places, I said, is there ever a chance I'm going to get to be on BBM? And he said, well, I've heard your tape from WCLR, and really, you don't really have our sound. He goes, you have more of an FM sound. You don't sound like news radio. Okay. And so I took that as a challenge. I didn't walk back into the newsroom and go back to work as a writer. I mean, which I did. But first thing I did was I gathered some audio cartridges and a newscast that I had written. And I went into a studio with the news radio sounders, and I recorded a newscast in BBM style.
Okay.
See, because he had heard me doing FM news. Well, I was doing FM news because I was on FM.
FM.
There was a little different, more conversational style, etc., which eventually they all wanted you to do anyway. So I wound up recording a newscast in BBM style. I took it back to Chris, and I said, here, I just recorded this. And he listened to it, and I was on the air the next weekend at WBBM. That's literally what happened.
Now, you know, what I love about you telling our audience this today, what you're telling us now, you know, you took that as that constructive, you know, and you said to yourself, I got this. And
I know I could do it. Sure.
That I can do this. That was fantastic because, like you said, 95% of us are walking back to our desk and saying, okay,
oh, well.
Right.
Yeah. And I didn't think that. I thought, I know I could do this, and I know I'm pretty good. I mean, I wasn't to the point of cockiness, but to the point of having enough confidence in yourself that you just said, you know what, what's the next thing I need to do to show him that I can do it? And
Bernie,
I did.
and it was basically, it was about the style of the radio station.
Sure,
correct?
because obviously CLR had done their newscasts in a more conversational, free-flowing way, where news radio was, you know, do a story, do the time check, here's the weather, introduce sports, those kind of things. It was a little bit different kind of a pace. Right. And so I wanted to show that I could do that as well. And it wasn't until MAQ started, and I happened to be filling in during afternoon drive during the week, a particular week, as an anchor, that Chris Berry, who was the assistant news director, and Chris Whitting, who was the news director, came to me during an hourly newscast, during the network newscast, where I came into the newsroom, got some water or whatever.
Sure.
And they said, by the way, we just got a call from somebody. We don't know who it was, but they were asking who was on the air. And they sounded really interested. They said, we know this WMAQ is going to be starting up, and we want to let you know we don't want you to go to them. We want to keep you with us. We want you on the air with us. So I never even thought to try to go to MAQ because I was already shown interest from BBM that that's the place to be. And I thought, you know, if you're going to be any place in news and radio, BBM is the place to be.
Right. And you talk about that. The compliment of compliments is that, because something like that just makes you know that you know what you're doing, how you're doing it, your preparation. They saw all this and were already worried, watch out, we could lose Tafoya somewhere down the road.
Right.
Fantastic, fantastic. You know what I love about listening to you all these years? I mean, you've covered so many things. I mean, you talk about from fire safety, air travel. One of the things that stood out with me, and I remember this, don't remember it year-wise, I'll know you'll remember it year-wise, but two things stand out with me with you is the one, which was, you know, still, I'm glad that this came to justice, was the Brown's Chicken Massacre. That one was unbelievable, and I felt like every day I was hearing something from Bernie Tafoya.
That was a very interesting time, because when I first got sent out there, it was I remember because I was anchoring weekends at the time.
It was winter, right, Bernie? It was
winter.
It was
I was anchoring, and it was very cold. Actually, it was bitter cold. And I was anchoring weekends and reporting 3 days a week. And during this time, the NFL playoffs were on BBM. There were 2 games going to be happening. And so I would come to work in a T-shirt and jeans and just have like a ski jacket to wear into the newsroom because I was going to be inside anchoring, right?
Right.
I got into the newsroom. They said, we're sending you out to
Palatine.
Yeah, you're going out to Palatine. And I went, oh my God. And there I am in a T-shirt, and I had a ski jacket, but I could have used a couple more layers because we had to stand outside. This is before they brought the bodies out of the restaurant. And so I was there during that evening. There were rumors about who might have been involved, and there was a police chase of a guy in Elgin, and so we all raced there. So that was a lengthy shift, and then obviously on and on. Now, Phil Rogers did the bulk of our reporting on that. I remember I did some of it, but Phil had a good share of reporting on the Browns Chicken Massacre.
But yeah, it was. I mean, I felt like I was living with you through it because and a great reporting by you. And I also remember the situation. I think it was with the Amtrak in Bourbonnais.
I was sent there, and that was kind of an unusual situation. I was the morning drive reporter for BBM, but I at the time I worked Tuesday through Saturday. I anchored Saturday mornings. And so Monday was my day off. So Monday evening, about 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, I get a call from the news director. And they said, we need you to go out to Bourbonnais, to cover this crash. And I'm thinking to myself, I was just about ready to go to bed. I've been
it's not a hop, skip, and a jump here.
It's well, I was actually on the south side. I lived in Beverly at the time. But the thing was, I had been up all day because I had lived a normal kind of weekend. My Sunday and Monday were lived kind of with normal hours. And I was getting ready to go to bed at 9 or 10 o'clock and then get up at 3:30 to do my job. Well, no. I had to get out to Bourbonnais, and I spent all night out there reporting on not only BBM, but also on the CBS radio network. And I don't think I left there till about 10 in the morning.
Wow, incredible. And again, you're looking at here, I'll use the word when we go back to the Browns and this, a tragedy.
Right. I mean, you do get your share of those, but what I've always liked about being a general assignment reporter is that I get to report all kinds of things, not just tragedies. Right. People say, "Oh, you just do cops and robbers." Well, one time I went over a list of my stories and kind of counted them up during, say, a 6-month period. Sure. And I think there were 25 to a third were crime, but the rest, 66 to 75% were all kinds of other stories: education, politics,
the Blue Angels situation,
religion.
The Chicago Cubs, which we're going to talk about.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. I have to tell you, I mean, when I was doing the research on you for a couple of weeks, and I again appreciate. I want to just stop it right here to tell our audience we're visiting today with Bernie Tafoya, WBBM reporter on the Odyssey, on we have it on the 105.9 FM, and of course his brilliant career with so many radio stations that you touched on: WIND, WCFL, The Clear, The Fire. Just fantastic. We're visiting with Bernie, and of course been in that car radio and in my mind for so many years. But I have to tell our audience, because sometimes people are unaware of what I have to say. Bernie, you have been had awards from the Best Reporter Awards from the Associated Press, United Press International, the Peter Lisger Awards, which is one of the most fantastic awards when it comes to journalism, from the Chicago Headline Club, and of course, when I was a little boy growing up with my father in Norridge, Illinois, this man just really made me want to do what I'm trying to do, the Edwin R. Murrow Award and the Borden Award from the Chicago Journalists Association. That Murrow Award is something else.
That's a team effort, that one.
Yeah.
That's part of a team effort. That wasn't an individual award. But I've had my share of awards for my reporting, and I'm always glad to be honored with those. But I always felt a little odd in that reporters are being given awards many times because we covered a tragedy well or something like that. Sometimes that's what you're getting an award for. You did a great job with it, but that it's still a tragedy. So it's kind of a mixed, kind of a bittersweet kind of a thing for me. But I appreciate it, and I'm glad I have it. I believe it or not, all my awards are just kind of stacked somewhere in a drawer. I don't hang them up or.
Right. But I mean, again, a couple of weeks, I think it was about a month ago, I interviewed Chuck Gowdy. And he's got the same approach that you, meaning this. He says, it's in your preparation and your delivery that we want the people to know it the right way. And I thought this is what I was getting out of you today. Just fantastic, because you've covered so many things.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
incredible.
We used to, at WBBM, we used to go places. I remember getting sent for a day and a half to Washington, D.C. when Dan Rostenkowski, the congressman, was being arraigned on federal charges of for misusing congressional funds.
Some funds, yeah.
Yeah, and so, but back then, now no radio station would send somebody to D.C. to cover that from Chicago. Right. But back then it was like, he's a Chicago guy. He's a major politician in the country. We need to be there. So I went there. Was in federal court when he was arraigned, and was reporting for a day and a half in D.C. and then came home.
Right. Exactly. Wow. You've probably forgotten some of the story, but some of the experiences you have are just second to none. I mean, I could be here with you for a couple of hours just to touch on all that. I want to play a little game with you. Okay. 5 questions that I want our audience to get to know Bernie Tafoya a little bit better, so we know what's going on here. And then I have something to say about you from somebody you know. That's the beautiful thing about you at the end. Okay. That first question, who's still, or maybe one or two, could be parents, could be anybody, who's those early mentors when Bernie Tafoya is on that golf course or he's at that red light and he thinks about, wow, who's that early mentor that you still think about? A couple of them.
There's one person in my life who is always with me, is my grandmother.
Okay.
She lived a half a block from me. She was born in Ireland. So was my grandfather, but I never knew him. He died a year before I was born. And we were actually born on the same day, not the same date.
Oh, wow.
We were both born on April Fool's Day. And I was born on her 49th birthday. But we had a connection. And so I basically lived with her my first year. My mom was only 23. She was married to my dad, but for various reasons, I was mostly living with my grandmother.
Sure.
And then when we moved to the projects, she happened to live in the projects as well, just right across a yard from us. So we were very close. We were always at my grandmother. She was always watching us for school, for whatever. And we even became involved in the same community organizations together. Wow. So her sense of faith in her Catholicism, her belief in people, or give people the extra benefit of the doubt. Sure. I got a lot of that from her positive attitude, her way to see another side, where even my mother was not seeing various sides. I'll tell you a real quick story. My mom and grandmother had gone to a church that was not Catholic church, and it was communion time, and my grandmother was going to go up and get communion, and my mom said, "You're not even this religion. Why are you going up?" And she said, "Communion is being invited to dinner in God's house." He goes, "Why would you turn down an invitation to have dinner in somebody's house?" And so there goes Grandma off to communion. My mom didn't, but my grandmother did. And I liked that sense of, I'm just going to go do it.
Right. What a way, she pictured that in her mind and remembered, hey, I've been invited here. Right. Beautifully said. Well, she raised a great grandson. I can tell you that much. I can tell from what you've said about her. Okay. What is Bernie Tafoya's favorite movie they can watch 200 times and not get bored? I'll give you one or two.
I'm not a movie guy. So okay. I mean, there are movies I've seen that I probably watched. It's a Wonderful Life. That's probably the one movie, and Jaws that I probably, and only Jaws because I saw it probably 5 times when it came out. I mean, it was just that kind of movie.
Oh yeah,
but
early
now
70s. I think it was 73. Yeah.
And now you'd laugh at the technology, given what there is today. But so, I don't know. They're just so. The most recent one I watched was Conclave, and I really enjoyed that movie.
Oh, that was, yeah, very good.
That was a really good movie. But, It's a Wonderful Life. I've enjoyed Bull Durham, the baseball movie. That's
Great.
a really good one. I've seen that a couple of
A
times.
little variety in Mr. Tafoya's life. Yeah,
Sure.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, I'm going to put you on the spot here because maybe you don't like this, but I got a feeling we're both cut from the same cloth when it comes to this.
Okay.
What's your top 5 restaurants that you like to go to? In Chicago, suburb, you name it.
I'm a simple guy.
Could be a hot dog stand.
We live in Orland Park, and for Mexican, I like El Cortez in Moquina. There's a local place called Girl in the Park here in Orland Park. That's just a nice little place.
You got a favorite pizzeria, Bernie?
We like there's too many pizzerias that I like. It depends on what you have a taste for at the time. Uno's was always my favorite, the deep dish from Uno's.
Very good.
With the patty sausage, especially when I worked at WIND. I worked, the Pizzeria Uno's was like 2 blocks away. So during my dinner break, I'd run and get a personal kind of pizza for dinner. But so Uno's is one, Lou Malnati's, Beggars, Fox's Pizza. For thin pizza, yeah. And now, here's a confession on my bucket list, which I being a Southsider, I can't believe I've never been there. But Vito and Nick's, I've never been to, so I still have to get. I have tried their frozen, and it's tremendous.
Is this on the South Side, Vito's and Nick's?
84th
I have
and
to tell you,
Pulaski.
a colleague of yours on the TV side, Chris Ty, has told me, who works for WBBM Channel 2 Chicago, has told me that was one that I have to try. So this North Sider's got to get up there. Now that you're saying it again, I might have to think, right?
And to be honest with you, everybody says Pequod's is their tops, and I've been there a couple times. I don't see what the big deal is with Pequod's. To me, it's burnt. They say I don't know. I won't go there, but I just like others better. I like others
maybe
better.
Maybe one day I can meet you up at Vito and Nick's.
Even Giordano's is good. Or Nancy's Pizza I like.
Yes.
The stuffed Nancy. So you name it. Depends on the day and what kind of pizza you're interested in. That's the good part about Chicago. We've got so many different kinds.
Sure. You've made it very clear that you love the Chicago Cubs in your some of your notes here in the.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So I'm going to put you on the spot about the Chicago Cubs, of course, the world champions of 2016. You have 2 minutes to decide this. Who are your starting 9 favorite Chicago Cubs of all time? One pitcher, and then the infielder, and the outfielder, and the catcher.
It's hard to pick one pitcher because
Bernie, I'm going to put you on the spot here. This is going to go viral.
Well, I'm not thinking that, but I got to go with Fergie.
He's your starter.
When you can pitch 200, when you can pitch more than 20 complete games in several seasons, when they can't even do that anymore.
No. Help because you have a blister on your pinky.
The other, I was going to go with the other 31, Greg Maddux.
All right, we'll give you 2 pitchers there.
Okay.
Ferguson Jenkins and Greg Maddux, same numbers.
Yeah, I got to go with Ernie at first.
You beautiful.
Second base, Rhino at second. Shortstop, of course, you can't have Ernie there too because he started out as a shortstop on the Cubs.
Yes, he did in the 50s and early 60s.
Yeah, he started out as a shortstop. So I'll go with Javi during his prime with the Cubs.
Okay.
Javi Baez. Third base, got to go with Ron Santo, Hall of Famer.
Yes, Hall of Famer.
Left fielder, you got to go with Billy Williams, Hall of Famer.
Williams.
Center field, and I'm trying to remember, was Rogers Hornsby has to be in that lineup.
Yeah, he was a second baseman.
He was a second baseman. That's the thing. So, I would probably move him out in right field anyway.
Okay, you're going to put Hornsby in right. Okay, sounds good.
And for center field, who else do we have who I could go with? They're just
we could go with the 84 center fielder who I loved, the guy who was on the 84 team, Bobby Dernier.
Yeah, he's okay. Oh, you know what? I'm going to go Pete Crow Armstrong. I'm going new kid.
Wow, what a player!
He's
right
shown a lot.
now.
If
He
he
reminds me of.
if
he
he
reminds
plays
me
like
of
that,
Pete Rose.
he plays hard. Let's put it
Plays
that
hard,
way.
very hard. Good.
Plays
Talent.
hard, and
All
he's
right, who's your catcher?
My catcher would be. I'm gonna go with David Rossi,
Okay.
mainly because for his smarts. It's not because he had tremendous catching skills, but he did know how to work a pitcher, and he wasn't a great hitter. But none of
Right.
the Cubs catchers have been great hitters.
No.
Even Randy Hundley was okay. Jody Davis, he had his good moments.
At his power moments.
But so I'll just pick one. I mean, Wilson Contreras.
Contreras, another guy.
He could be right in that conversation.
Okay, we'll go with Ross then. That'll be good. I was thinking you'd say Huntley, but I was wrong. Okay.
I would have liked to have said it, but I needed to mix it up a little more.
You did a great job. That's a great team. Well, I'm going to ask you a last question, then I'm going to say something about what somebody said, and then let you go here. Today.
Okay.
1976 when this all starts for you to now, and you see the passion with you all the time in these questions that I've asked you today. If you had to do this all over again, is Bernie Tafoya doing it the same way?
Probably. I love radio. It's unfortunate that radio is changing the way it is, where people aren't listening to radio as much as they used to. So
Right.
BBM still is like number one in the ratings, or has really great ratings, even when they're not number one.
Sure.
But it's of a smaller listening pie than, say, when I started. On the other hand, technology has improved to the point where I can take my phone, and if I'm in a place where I don't have my equipment with me, I can turn that into a reporting device. I can record an interview.
Sure.
I can do a video interview if I want to, and we can put it on our internet. Now we're multimedia, which I love.
Sure.
So there have been changes in where people are listening more to podcasts, or it's kind of news on demand. But I have to admit, I'm more that way now too. I've been trained just
Right.
going along with the way technology is these days.
It's like we have to adapt to what is now.
And you should.
Yeah, exactly.
You see what's available. Look what's happened in newspapers. And as a matter of fact, I had thought about going into newspapers back when I started. And when I first got the job in radio, I thought, this sounds great because it's immediate. And as a matter of fact, the way Dick Stone told it to me, and what convinced me to stay in radio and not go to newspapers, thank God I listened.
Yeah.
He said, we can go on the air. When we have a breaking story, they have to wait till it's time to publish again.
Sure.
We can break into a music, we can break into a newscast, we can break into anything with a breaking story.
Sure.
Where you can't do, and even back then on TV you couldn't.
Right,
If they're in the middle of Wheel of Fortune, you're going to wait till 10 o'clock to see that story.
Exactly.
Whereas in radio, we're able to go on right then
Go
and
at
there.
any time. Right,
So
right.
I always loved the immediacy, and I never had any interest in going into television because of that, and because, believe it or not, the hours.
Oh, yeah.
Even though you can have weird hours in radio, generally they've always wanted us to work 8 hours. We're union, and so we would either get paid overtime or whatever. And so I wanted to have a family life. I wanted to have something away from my life
Sure.
on
And this
the
is not
air.
something you could walk in 1 minute to 5 and say, okay, I'm here, and then leave. I think a lot of people have that misconception.
Well, yeah, but that's the thing. You want to be able to do your job, but you also want to have a life. So, like, as I'm stepping back and retiring, I'm not twiddling my thumbs. I'm volunteering. I see my grandkids quite a bit. I golf with friends. So
Yes.
it's great.
I'm going to leave you with something that a colleague said about you when I interviewed him 3 years ago. Your name came up. So this was really nice, and we kind of touched on him earlier today. But this comes from Pat Cassidy, an old colleague anchor.
Good friend of mine.
During your era also. And Pat said, when it comes to Bernie Tafoya, it's dedication and probably one of the greatest work ethics he ever saw Bernie, I truly appreciate you coming on a conversation today with John Conenna, and I hope we could do a part two, and because we could stay on, I could stay with you here today for 2-3 hours, but I
There
got
are
to go back to
definitely
work.
more stories to tell, for sure.
For sure.
John, thanks for inviting me. I appreciate it.
I want to thank everyone. This will come out on YouTube and Spotify, Bernie, in probably a couple days, but we have visited with the legendary reporter, Bernie Tafoya, WBBM, and we will see you down the road. Thank you.